So when the divorce started and thinking what was I going to do, it made the most sense to me that I would come here and live here, volunteer here.
Hello, my name is Nancy Levy of videojournalsonline, and I have the opportunity to interview a very close friend of mine, Pat Kelly, who has had a very interesting life, but exceptionally interesting in the last couple of years. And so we want to document some of her experiences with that. Pat, why don't you lead us off with your age, some of the things about your past life, and then what led you into the fact that I'm sitting in Fort Lauderdale and you're sitting in South Africa.
I'm Pat Kelly and I am 60 years old, and I have been in Africa for a little over 3 years, and I have been volunteering here.
What caused you to have the freedom to leave the United States and go to Africa for 3 years and explore different opportunities?
I had been in my previous life had been in the media industry. I was a magazine publisher, and about 13 years ago decided to retire early, the age of 47, because there was a sizable age difference between myself and my now ex-husband. And we had planned to travel together. And so I need to retire to do that. He was already retired. So actually moved to Mexico and lived there for 10 years and spent our time retired living in Mexico, living in the United States some, and then the rest of the time was traveling around the world. I knew that I wanted to continue to travel going forward in my life. Actually, had always thought that because the age difference, that change from my third chapter would start when my husband at the time would have passed, just thinking share logistics of the age difference. And it ended up came about sooner because of our divorce. And so that took place a little over 3 years ago. I'd lived in Africa years ago, working for the UN, living in Sudan. And at that time, I got what they call the Africa bug and knew I wanted to come back to this continent. And so had traveled here in the past. I have a really good friend that lives here in Johannesburg, so I'd come to visit her. And so I just knew I wanted to come back here. And so when the divorce started and thinking what was I going to do, it made the most sense to me that I would come here and live here, volunteer here.
Okay. And how did you find out about what volunteer opportunities were available?
Okay, so the process for me started again many years ago when I did live in Sudan and had met people that were volunteering in Africa. I didn't really know how that worked and how you got to do that. And also, believe it or not, had seen a movie years ago and it was based on a true story. And I knew that at the end of the movie, they talked about the organization that this woman had started. And so when I'd researched it, she took volunteers. It was in Kenya, but the timing, political atmosphere there made me think that wasn't the right place. So I did my research. I Googled. I knew there were long-term volunteer opportunities. And I specifically, because the model that a lot of these organizations use, it can be very expensive to volunteer at a nonprofit around the world, but specifically in Africa, it can be if it involves animals because so many people want to volunteer with animals. But I also had heard that if you spent a long enough period of time, that they would provide women for it. Through divorce, there's the financial uncertainty. And trying to decide, am I going to do? I didn't want to go back to work. And I thought if I could live free with room and board provided, isn't that works almost the same way as going back to work and having to pay for everything that to support the new life. So I'd been retired for 10 years. So it made sense that to me that I could travel, have this wonderful experience, the adventure of it, and do good work, have a purpose. So I researched and through Google found the first organization that I came here to volunteer for and was for 13 months. And that was an organization called, it's a bush school and wildlife orphanage. And that's my first position was when I came here. I was the outreach manager for them. Actually, I found them through an agency. There's agencies listed when you Google, if you say overseas volunteering, if you say long-term volunteering, there's different keywords, eco volunteering. And I found them through an agency, the name, and then had contacted them directly. And so I could have gone through the agency, but because I was a long-term instead of a short-term volunteer, it made more sense that I dealt with them directly. And they are in South Africa. They're in a province that's north. It's the most northeastern province, and Limpopo is the name of it. And so it's actually between two towns in the middle of bush, and surrounding it is a big five game reserves. And the base of their program is that they teach local children in neighboring villages. They come in and they stay at this camp for a week, and they learn about ecotourism, and they learn about resource management, and they would learn about preserving the resources of South Africa so that the animals continue to be here, and also as a benefit that tourists still come to see the animals and that they can get jobs and understand that there's a financial benefit for these local kids to protect the resources, whether it's anti-poaching or saving little animals or not polluting the rivers and not throwing garbage down. And so that's the basis. Because it's a wildlife orphanage, the kids get to help maintain or feed and protect and clean up after whatever wildlife that in this orphanage. So they also get an appreciation for the animals, because as much as everybody thinks they're surrounded by them, they rarely get to see wild animals because everything's fenced off, whether national park or private parks. So that's the basis for this program.
And how long did you say?
I was there for 13 months. It was a long time to live in the bush with a lot of volunteers. We had volunteers that came from all over the world, and some of them came for a week and some of them came for a year, like I did. And it was an amazing experience for me, especially for the first one, because you do create a family environment living with all these people and the animals in the middle of nowhere. It's like a movie. It's the best thing, the way to describe it. And there's, of course, going to be challenges living in a camp environment with a bunch of people you don't know. But for the most part, those were minimal. It was just such a great experience. And to wake up and have a giraffe walking by is, you can't beat it. And that's exactly what I went there for, of course. And so you feel good, you're helping because these kids are amazing. And my job's continued education. So I would take volunteers from around the world, and we would go out to the villages every week and do continued education at the schools for these kids. And so it's great. I'm still friends with them, some of them on Facebook. It was just great getting to know them as well and feel like hopefully you have some impact, positive impact on their life.
So tell me who owns the camp and how many people are there at any one time? Who cooks? What do you cook? How does it decide? You did have a room.
The long-term volunteers, for the most part, shared a house. And so I had a nice room, and upstairs there were three other rooms. And so there were other places for people to stay. Short-term volunteers would be staying in different chalets. But for the most part, it was great because we all got to know each other really well, and we shared a house, but we had our own private spaces. The organization was started in 2006, and it's by a French woman and a Zimbabwean man that they'd met and fallen in love in South Africa, and had both watched a TV show when they were kids, just like I did. It was reruns because it was, I think, the end of the 50s, early 60s, called Daktari. It was a TV show, and they had watched it, her in Normandy, France, and he in Zimbabwe. And so when they met and they talked about starting an organization like this, they both remembered the name of that show and started this organization. And so they've been running it. Sometimes there would be 20 international volunteers, and there was a local staff that did cooking for us and cleaning for us, for the kids, for the volunteers, for the staff. But there was a time that I actually took over the kitchen and helped maintain the kitchen with local staff, and different things change. You had your job and you had to be flexible. This is Africa. It's a famous saying here is TIA. This is Africa. It was a great place to be. You felt very safe. It was definitely a family environment. We had a lot of young volunteers, but then others, not too many my age, but there were definitely some others that were in their 50s and 60s.
So if you want to go for a short period of time and you want to pay to volunteer, what does that cost?
I'm not sure right now because, again, COVID has affected so much, but I would say the longer you're there, the less expensive it is. But I would guess right now that a week is somewhere around $500 for a week. And that includes everything, your room and board and They organize everything. It's very safe. They make sure that, again, because we have so many young volunteers, that everything that you need is taken care of while you're there. And that you do work. The volunteers that come there teach the kids, they prep the kids, and the program doesn't end until the kids go to sleep at night. So at night, there can be bushwalks, there can be movies. So you start early in the morning and you're doing maintenance for the animals, feeding them, cleaning up after them. Then you teach, and then there's meals. And then at night, might be watching Lion King, it might be doing a nighttime bushwalk or bonfire, and you go to bed at 10 o'clock, and in the morning, it's a full day, but it's very rewarding and it's fun. It's different every day as well.
How did you watch movies?
We had a movie projector that we would hook up with the computer, and they were downloaded movies. There's Wi-Fi there, hot water. It's all solar. It's very eco-friendly, but we have good Wi-Fi there. Actually, but the movies we would download or have a DVD, because The Lion King is played every Wednesday night, so you get very used to The Lion King because you have a different group of kids every week. That would be on, but we would also have This Is the Planet and different educational types of DVDs for them. Yeah. Watch at night, we would watch Netflix. Everybody would have their own little Netflix. They'd go to the room and watch Netflix. So you definitely got things there to make it comfortable.
Let's say the bush has changed,
Yeah. Wi-Fi is available.
but you did not work there for 13 months, 7 days a week. While you were there, you had a certain schedule and then you had breaks and you went and did other things.
Okay. For the most part, the schedule is Monday through Friday. Saturdays, we would go into town and go shopping, or we could stay at the camp, but usually we go into the closest town, which was an hour away, and do shopping and have lunch. And you could get a massage. The town that's close by is the town that people fly into to go to these luxury game lodges. So there's restaurants and there's a massage place, a spa place, and you would do shopping because you're living there. You need a toothpaste. You might want to get snacks. So the weekends you're off, and the kids are only there Monday through Friday. So the weekends are off. And then at the time when I was there, the schedule was every other month, you get a week off. And some people chose to just stay in the camp, but I would usually come back down here, take the shuttle down to come back to Joburg for a week and have the city experience. Also, there were times that there was no school because of school breaks. So for the holidays with different volunteers, we did road trips around South Africa and would take off 2 weeks and go do a road trip. And that was pretty common. People would, when they were volunteering, go to Cape Town, fly to Cape Town so that they could see more of South Africa than just where we were. And so it was a good balance, and you definitely get enough free time that you can enjoy Africa. We would go to the Kruger National Park on a weekend and go for overnight safari as group. Just the volunteers would arrange these things, and actually Daktari will arrange it as well. So we would go do that, so that again, they want you to have a good experience, and getting different volunteers all the time sometimes. And nobody gets tired of going to the national park and seeing the big five. So always a happy thing to do.
What is it that you accomplished for them in your role?
As outreach manager, I helped with the curriculum, updating it regularly. And every week we would go to the different secondary schools and have eco classes where we would continue to educate. Most of them had already been to Daktari for the week. Some of them hadn't, and they chose to stay after school. It was all voluntary. The school provided us with classrooms. And so we would go over geography. We would go over conservation and learning about the environment, the resources of South Africa, which were including the animals, but also just so that they understood the other resources, diamonds and coal and platinum and plutonium. South Africa is loaded with resources that the rest of the world relies on in many ways. So it was getting them to understand, because they're village schools, they're government schools. There's certain things that are good about them, but you find out pretty quickly that they don't know the countries that are nearby. And we would adapt the curriculum need be. And the kids, most of the time, they were 10th, 11th, and 12th graders that were at these schools. And so I feel like, what did we accomplish? I feel like just being there is one thing, because they get to meet people from around the world and understand that bigger place than their little village. Also encouraging them and educating, just helping them with their education and expanding it, because the classrooms in these areas, they'll have 80 kids in a classroom. So they're not getting one-on-one, they're not getting small groups. So I think everybody felt that you really at least broadening their horizons, and introduce them to the volunteers from around the world and go over what countries they were from and do they know about those countries. It's just opening the world for them.
These were students at a later age, a higher grade level.
Yes, because the kids that come to Daktari every week, there's 4 girls, 4 boys that come every week, and they're in 8th grade. So this is the primary school, secondary school, the yeah, most of the school, maybe 9th grade, whatever. It would be kids that they participated. You didn't have to. Somebody could have moved in and not gone to. It was made available to everybody in that secondary school that they wanted to stay after school. They could participate in this classroom, in this class. It was once a week because we moved around to different schools.
And what percentage of the population, I mean, I know you can't give me the statistics, but in your mind, do they stay in school or are they tempted to go and work with a family farm, or what is going to benefit them when they graduate from high school?
Most of them, there's definitely agricultural kids that are growing up on farms, and school is mandatory in South Africa up to 9th grade. And then after that, they can choose. Of course, you're hoping that somebody's going out and checking. And it's not, it's an impoverished country in many ways, especially the more rural areas. But majority of these kids, they'll stay in. Unemployment is extremely high here. Before COVID, it was 34% in the province of Limpopo. Now I've heard statistics of up to 50% in the country of unemployment. They learn English, but it's also good for them to continue to practice and to be around foreigners. They learn about the world. We talk about life skills. We talk about education and the importance of it. Just like America, whatever country you're from, there's going to be the cross section of impoverished, and this is all the schooling they're going to get. And then you hope and you meet kids that do go to college. I'm still in touch with some that are going on to university. And so you encourage and try to round out their knowledge, expand it. Again, these schools are not what we would consider great education. These are rural areas. It's not like Johannesburg, Cape Town. These are rural areas. There's goats walking around, there's chickens walking around, and sometimes there's no power in the rooms. And we actually provided Wi-Fi for some of the schools so that we could show videos and for them to learn more about the world.
And so you decided, I believe, before you went to Africa, not to get the malaria medication.
That's true. I had taken the malaria medication the whole time living in Sudan and Kenya. But when I was coming here, it just more modernism with the medical system has said, first of all, long periods of time, it's not good for your body. And there's some thoughts that if you take it for long periods of time and you get malaria, then the treatment doesn't work as well as if you didn't take it. So I chose not to take it. And there was very few cases. We had some staff that got it, but nobody else, none of the volunteers had ever gotten it. And since then, I've lived in other countries as well, volunteering. And during this period of time after Daktari, going to Tanzania, going to Malawi, and again, I've thankfully not gotten it. Actually, in Johannesburg, it's not here. So it's rural areas or near water that you get it more. Yeah. The malaria mosquitoes are much more active at night. So everybody did sleep under a mosquito net, which, yes, helps a lot. In theory, you can't get malaria during the day. It is at night. So we all slept under mosquito nets. So at Daktari, we had tests. If somebody didn't feel well immediately, we would be poking and getting the blood test and making sure that they didn't have it. But usually it was a staff member that when they went home didn't sleep under a mosquito net.
Okay, but you did leave your windows open and you did have guests during the night.
Yes, and that was intentional. I was told if I wanted this room, that the bush babies get to come in and out of this room. And having grown up loving bush babies from afar, this was music to my ears. Yes, summer and winter, even when it was very cold, there were windows that stayed open, and these bush babies came in because there were actually boxes there for ones that wanted to have babies in the room, and they would eat yogurt, and they would jump in and out of my room every night, and it made me very happy.
And
I love them.
On the mosquito netting, or down,
yeah, they would bounce on my bed, and
down looking at your computer.
Yeah, the ones look at the ones you're referring to, looking at my computer, were ones that we had saved that were babies and that we would feed. And so some of them lived in my room in a cage initially till they were old enough, and we would feed them every 3 hours and then longer periods of time till they were old enough, and then they would be released. And so the one that was sitting on my computer was one I had taken care of, and he was tame for a while, and then he was released. But yeah.
Had you fed them yogurt?
They would eat yogurt. They would go eat that what they would eat, their little animals and bugs and whatever when they were loose. But when they were babies, they would eat a cereal or they would eat yogurt. And so we just kept the bowl for the ones that would come in because they remembered that they'd grown up there, even though they'd been released. So some of them would come in, some would come in and they would have their babies. We had little boxes there. And it was just, yeah, they got used to it. Generations would come back actually. And so they would come through. So yeah, sometimes I think it was 8 one time in the morning, bouncing around on the bed. And it was amazing how you could get used to it and sleep right through it. I completely slept through them bouncing all over the place. Yeah, that was a highlight.
And why don't you explain about the weather? I think that right now I'm in South Florida. It's summer. It's warm, toasty, humid, and you are in winter.
I am. It is winter here and it is cold here. Actually, at night, we have freezing regularly at night right now, but so it most likely tonight will be under the freezing point of 32 crunchy. The grass will be crunchy in the morning. And during the day, though, it warms up to 60s because the sun is lovely. And so if you're outside, many times it's warmer outside because the homes, they're not made the same way they are in the States. There's not double glazed windows and there's not central heat. So it's cold inside, sometimes more than outside. But up in the bush, you just had to use extra blankets. And during the summer, it's really hot. It could be over 100 during the day. And then at night, it would stay really hot. And thankfully, we had little fans, but you just had to deal with it. It's just what you have to deal with. And the power is not cheap here in the cities. And so just live with little heaters and got to toughen up over here. So you just layer. Layering is very important right now.
And so even in Johannesburg, though, you have like blackout periods or where the electricity goes is intentionally brought down.
They call it load shedding, and you're told usually ahead of time the schedule. And because the demand is so great during, of course, winter, everybody's got the little heaters on. They do load shedding, and we won't have power for 2 hours at a time. I've heard bad stories. It could be 4 times a day, but here it's usually 1 to 2 times a day. But it's been very cold, and they've stopped doing it right now because people could die.
So let's go back to you're at Daktari. So you're there for a month and then you're taking, what did you say, a week off?
Every other month, I would
Yeah.
take a week off. I'm not actually sure that's still the schedule, but that's what it was when I was there. And but morning, you have a very common food here is avo on toast. So during the season, you have yogurt, cereal, toast, peanut butter, that type of thing during the week. And then lunch would be a big hot lunch. It could be spaghetti. It could be stew. It could be local food. Dinner can be chicken, steak. The food's very good. People pay to be there and they take that seriously and they make sure that everybody's got good meals. And then on Sundays, they have a full English breakfast, a different type of thing. And so they make it nice. And because again, they're catering to people that are paying money to come there to have a good experience.
So in the house where the long-term volunteers are living, what are the bathroom facilities like?
I lucked out. I got the Bush baby room also came with an ensuite shower and toilet. So I lucked out. Age has some merit, and I was also committed to be there over a year. Upstairs for me, there were 3 single rooms that shared a bathroom. And then there were some little cottages that we also had long terms, and they were actually little standalone cottages, or they are still there, and they're en suite. Other short-term volunteers, all the girls would maybe be in 5 beds to a room, and then they have a bathroom right in there. And so everybody is en suite. They just wouldn't have their own rooms. Most of the time they would share. That's the short-term volunteers.
Okay, so how long when you got there did it take before you started saying to yourself, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Every day. The first morning I remember waking up and coming out, and you go through this fenced area and you come to the central area. And there were all these birds that I'd never seen before. They're called yellow-billed hornbill. And there's a blind donkey that lives there named Eeyore, and he's walking by, and these birds are there, and there's guinea fowl, and they're running around. The reality, and you come in and you're on a shuttle, and you come into the camp, and you have dinner, and you're learning so much, and then it's dark, and you go to bed. And it was winter when it was already cold, but the first morning was me waking up to something bouncing on the bed, and my eyes just flew open, and I feel boom on the bed, and I thought, "What the heck?" And so it was shocking, and it's really dark, and so my eyes, and it was like, "Oh, it's gotta be the bush baby." And I couldn't see anything, and it is amazing because I wasn't afraid. I just went back to sleep because they would come before the light, but then that morning, dressing and walking out and just seeing these unusual birds, they're called, little bill, hornbill, hornbill, and these guinea fowl flying around, and maybe a antelope walking by. It's just, you think, for me, it was heaven. But otherwise, it's just, I'm not in Kansas anymore, Toto. So it was just such a great experience. And I'd been on safaris before, but this was waking up thinking this is gonna be my home for at least the next year. It was great. It was happy times experiencing all of this, so that was a good thing, and it was just what the doctor ordered, it was just what I needed.
So what happened when you had an animal that was rescued and then subsequently died? That's been sad.
You think you're gonna save everything, or they're gonna be able to save everything, and you realize that nature is very cruel, and it's not, even if it's not cruel, nature is nature, so we would have babies being brought to us of mongoose, bush babies would fall out of their nests and some around the camp sometimes, and we rescue them. People would bring us antelope. In the past, they'd had babies zebra, they'd had cheetahs that are still at the camp that are brought. And so those you don't hand feed, obviously, but any of these that people would take turns every 3 hours. We would have shifts of taking turns to wake up in the middle of the night. So you have dedicated volunteers. They love it because you have the alarm going off at 2 in the morning. You have 2 a.m. feeding to walk out through this camp and get to little tiny antelope needs to be hand fed every 3 hours. And we do that for months. And sometimes you do that and they get released and they die or something kills them. And you're sad, except you did everything you could. And eventually, you just start to think everything dies in Africa because it's just nature. Animals, things happen. And so you get used to it. It's the reality here. So you do your best, but some things live and some things don't.
Tell us about some of the side trips you took from there. I know you took a trip over the holidays, correct?
2 Christmases, because I was there over 2 Christmases. The first one, we did a 2-week driving trip up to the coast of Africa, St. Lucia. We went through Swaziland. We just another volunteer from Slovenia, and I had become good friends. She was a housemate, and so we were gonna be there. So we planned it all out and took off and drove all over the place and had great experiences, had a great Christmas, and got to see another country, which was very neat. And then the next year with a different volunteer, I just had left Daktari and she was still there, and she came and met me in Port Elizabeth where I was volunteering at a different place. And we did another road trip and went into Lesotho, the country of, and it was interesting pass, and went to different towns and stayed in different little burgs, I would say. And so it was a great fun trip to see more of South Africa in another country. And like I said before, that many times we would, as a group, go to Kruger, which was an hour away, and stay at a little huts or whatever that we would all pitch in, or go to a place where we would all cook and stay at a different reserve to be able to see animals, and go to the Blythe River Canyon and all these just beautiful places.